So, Jay, today was, you were just saying to me earlier, this is a hard day. We heard about over the weekend that police were going to come and remove barriers. They did yesterday, but they never told you or anyone a timeline of when or if they were going to do what they did this morning. What is your opinion on what happened, the police response to CHOP this morning?
My opinion around what's going on with CHOP, and more specifically what went on in the early morning of today, is that it shows the character, I think, of Jenny Durkan, of the way that she goes about doing things, of part of the issue and perpetuating the system and in the cycle we're trying to fight. This really started a little bit earlier. A few days ago, there was a march that involved, Jenny Durkan's area or of residence. That was followed by her doing what I would genuinely call a Karen, to be real with you, where she then called for one of the black council members to want to be investigated and potentially removed, which was led by her calling the cops on her own citizens. And I think the order was put through at about 2 o'clock in the morning. They showed up at about 5, made an 8-minute address that they were going to be reclaiming this area, and then gave people 8 minutes. And within that started flipping people's tents while they were still inside of them. And all of that behavior speaks to the character of Jenny Durkan. It speaks to the character of our governing bodies. It speaks to exactly why you have individuals making their way out of their homes and into the streets to demonstrate and exercise their First Amendment right.
Jay, we've been hearing from, the city, from others that, protesters in the city have been having these conversations. They've been talking. As someone who's been on the ground involved with this movement, what is the progress between your demands in the city? What wheels are in motion right now, if any?
In regards to the progress that is being made, as far as the demands that have been given to Jenny Durkan and the conversations that she is or is not having with organizers, it has been a wash on her end, I would say. We are extremely disappointed in the way that she's chosen to carry herself within this movement. She has implanted false flag organizers that she's also seen taking those closed door meetings with at the church the other day, that she is clearly not doing any vetting on. Specifically, if you start looking into any of those individuals, you kind of see that one of two things are happening. Either this is genuinely what she thinks black people are, or how they carry themselves, or the way that they live in a society, or she doesn't vet them or look at them at all. And on either side of that, it's not a good position to put yourself when you are at the position you are in our governing body.
Are these talks that are going on right now with the city, you feel more performative than progressive or really purposeful?
I would say the talks that are going on in the city right now that are happening with Jenny Durkan in these closed door meetings are absolutely performative. And I think that it's a photo opportunity for her to look as though she's doing her job. I think you'll see that reflected in the officials that she's chosen. Carmen Bess, a black woman, as the police chief, Scoggins as the fire chief. And this is also that business can continue on as usual underneath. And again, it speaks to her character.
Yeah. Do you feel like the goal was ever change when these talks came off, started up after, the protests and the marches? Were they ever really committed to change?
The question of whether Jenny Durkan is committed to change. I think that she is committed to upholding her position. I think that she is committed to spinning rhetoric that speaks to the 1%ers and keeps their business and their investments in place. And I think that she's committed to appearing as though she is genuinely meeting with and understanding the demands of people. And to understand her history is really disappointing, because there was a point in time where I think that Jenny Durkan was in this for the right reasons, and yet she's climbed a ladder and then forgotten where the ground was. So I don't have a lot of faith in her ability to create change, nor do I think that she has much interest in genuinely creating change. I think what we're seeing is political pressure from the 1%ers and the powers that be in this city, as well as outside of this city, our president looking down on her, etc. And if she's interested in things changing realistically and not just going back to business as usual, because that will never happen, it's going to require her implementing her senses, stepping up, and doing the work in a real way.
So I saw on Twitter this morning from you that you said that, CHOP was never the goal, and it's important to keep that in mind. Can you elaborate on that and kind of talk about, maybe what CHOP evolved to and where it's going from here?
Yes. I'll say appearance of CHOP within this movement is kind of like a side effect to the movement itself. It was never the goal for us to establish Capitol Hill as an area that we could occupy for an extended period of time. It's a symptom that is coming out of demonstration. That happens in any demonstration anywhere. And I think that CHOP genuinely can become, or had become in a way, a distraction from the actual demands that have been given to Jenny Durkan and other governing bodies. It was a distraction from the reality that brought us out. What has been going on in the Black community historically is unbelievable. It's devastating. It's traumatizing in so many ways, but we are a resilient people and we're also brilliant people. And I think areas like CHOP are an example, not just for us, but for any place across the country that is rising up during this time and choosing to be active, choosing to advocating for the validity of Black lives, choosing to insert themselves into this movement. This was an example, and it can still be an example of what can come to any block within Seattle should our demands not be met.
Have those demands evolved at all through these last few weeks? Coming off what happened today, do your demands stay the same? What are they, and have they evolved at all?
The demands that are currently with Jenny Durkan have actually been with her for a really long time, longer than the death that happened with George Floyd, the murder that happened with George Floyd. Excuse me. It has been a long-standing conversation that the Seattle Police Department's use of excessive force speaks to the fact that they don't need further training, but that they need defunding. $407 million is a ridiculous amount of money. For them to be abusive in the way that they are to their citizens is absolutely unacceptable. And the goal is to defund the Seattle Police Department, reallocate those funds specifically into the training of more qualified individuals to respond to things like mental health crisis. You don't need somebody showing up with a gun when it's a mental health problem, when there's a domestic violence issue. So really transferring, and California is actually doing a wonderful job of kind of putting this at the forefront, where they're defunding some from the police department and putting that back into qualified individuals who have taken the time to do the training to respond to issues that don't involve somebody just showing up with a badge and a gun. So I think there are examples out there, and that it's more than possible. Obviously, the release of all protesters without charges is one of the demands. That is absolutely key, considering we were just expressing our First Amendment right to protest, and as documented, you can see that we were peaceful, a lot more peaceful than other cities, in fact. And the response to that has been police brutality, has been excessive force, the use of rubber bullets, flash grenades, and things of that nature. And again, it speaks to the character of our governing bodies.
This movement has garnered a lot of attention, mainly because of the occupation from media outlets coast to coast here locally. When you see the messages being, put out there about this movement here in Seattle, what is wrong? What is the media getting wrong with covering something like this, and what is important to say to kind of set the record straight?
I think that everybody has a job to do in this. So when you ask me a question about what the media's role in this, their job is to report accurately. But as we all know, those kind of behind closed door conversations are what sells and what's interesting. And it has become almost a daily, if not weekly, interaction to watch a Black person die on the news, whether it's from the police officer or some other interaction. But it's at this point kind of centralized around these police and Black community interactions and the way that those play a part. And they sell at the end of the day. That's the bottom line, is that conversation is prominent it is important, but it doesn't necessarily speak to the other side, which is that the people who are still alive, the Black people who are coming out of their homes and speaking around this movement and doing what they can to say this isn't okay, they are being painted as domestic terrorists. They are being painted as people who have no jobs, have no sense of direction, have absolutely no grit or composure or compassion within this, really, and that they just kind of want to flail their arms and be upset. And I find that to be so degrading to the reality of the situation, because if this issue can matter so much behind those closed door meetings where we understand this is going to hit, you have to start asking yourself, why is it hitting? What about it is making it hit? And why is there so much voyeurism around what's happening to Black people? Why is this enjoyable for us in a way? And sellable at the very least in a way, because we can sit around and say that it's tragic, but what's even more tragic is to then turn your camera onto a Black person who survived an interaction like that and go, you're disorganized, or you're stepping out into protest, do you even know why? Or to ask them demeaning questions, when in reality, it is your guys' job to report accurately on what's happening on the ground, as well as what's happening in the minds of Black people, and to paint an image that tells a story that's true to us. And it's not historically true that Black people have been properly represented in media. Part of the reason why I say white bodies to the front is because of the rhetoric that the media has spun. Anytime you've seen a Black person die, really in the last few years, but in the paper, they would never put the name of the individual. They would just say Black body found. And to me, that's very striking, because when you see domestic terrorists of a real nature, the individual who went into a church, the white-bodied man, and shot multiple people, his name was put out, his school picture is put out, he's painted in a way that's like, this is a kid that went down a wrong path, and Black people are not given that same experience in the news and the media, and that there's something very wrong there.
Yeah. What else about this movement, where you guys are heading, that, I might have missed my questions, that you feel is important to include in this conversation, and just is important that people know as we watch the movement in this area continue?
I think it's important within this movement to remember that this is historical, and what side of this you're going to fall on speaks to your character. It speaks to your your legend. It speaks to the character of who you are and where you were during this time. We scrutinize historically people that fell silent, that did not move soon enough, and this is one of those moments. And whether you're seeing it that way or not is something you also have to start questioning. This is a time to self-educate, to utilize the resources that are there for us, to start implementing all of your senses, and offering opportunities and support and amplifying Black voices that are speaking out in this movement, that have what it takes to move it forward.
And one more question, people have seen the images from this morning, headlines read, CHOP is over. Where can we physically look to the movement next? Are we going to be seeing it around Seattle? Is there going to be more marches? What are we going to see?
In response to the statement that CHOP is over, CHOP's not over. CHOP is far from over. CHOP is so far from over. And CHOP is going to change names. And it's also going to change faces and places. It would be incredibly inappropriate of me to tell you where or to tell you when, but I think what you can absolutely expect is that the people of Seattle, just like other areas and other cities and other states, we are not going to be going quietly. And we are going to be mobilizing. We have gotten great notes from some of our brothers and sisters over in Hong Kong who are doing the Be Water tactic, who are moving in a different way. So I think that what you can expect is we're going to be showing up not just here, but come November, we'll be showing up at the polls. When it comes time for election, absolutely, we're going to be speaking in more ways than one. And for Black people, this movement has been going on for a long time. For some of us, this is just our life story. And for white people who have recently entered the chat, as you might say, now is the time to start allocating your resources, utilizing your white privilege in a way that benefits Black realities. This is so far from the end.
Jay, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add that I might have missed? Or
no, thank you so much for your time. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you.
Absolutely.